What's up, Browns fans? Spencer German, Anthony Moeglin with you on a pretty monumental day all around here in Browns land as we talk about the big news to start off Super Bowl week. You know, it's funny, Megs, like Super Bowl week is the Monday of Super Bowl week is generally like a start of a coronation of sorts for, you know, getting ready to crown the next champion of the league and talk about the two teams and their past there and you know, how important this game is to all these different individual players. And Myles Garrett basically hijacked the whole thing by announcing that he was requesting a trade from the Cleveland Browns in a statement. I think everyone's already seen the statement at this point. They've read it at this point. Key line in it is the part about how his goal was never to go from Cleveland to Canton. His goal was to win Super Bowls. A direct shot at Andrew Berry's comments that he made several weeks ago. There's a lot of different layers to this. We're going to try to dissect as many as we can here in a short period of time. But Megs, I guess we'll start with what was your initial reaction when the trade request came down earlier today?
Yeah, I was just kind of hoping that it was that Schefter got hacked. Like everyone thought Sean got hacked last night when he dropped or on Saturday.
The Luka trade feels like it was months ago, honestly.
Yeah, right. Like that was that, and that's a whole nother story. And that, like you said, that's just like gone. Like that didn't even happen. But was just hoping that that Schefter was like, nope, got a false tip, and we're good. But obviously not the case, right? Obviously this is as bad as it gets. For us, because I saw it somewhere, I think it was Tom Withers had tweeted it out or posted it out, that it felt like we were finally turning the corner, right? Browns fans were finally able to turn the corner on the whole Deshaun Watson thing. We're going to get out of this horrible contract. We're going to be able to actually start, you know, figuring out a path forward. And then bang, all that up in flames today when Myles dropped that. It's just, man, it's hard. Everyone knows by now. If you're watching this show, if you've been on this channel before, I try to see everything pretty positively. This one's tough to spin, even for me. I've spun 3-14. I've spun 0-16. I predicted the Browns to beat the Ravens with Bailey Zappi, right? Like this one stings. This one's tough.
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it, but I think sort of, you know, there's a lot of talk about like where they go from here, but I kind of want to start with how they even got here in the first place, and it's kind of crazy that, and like as you look back on this road to this point, the thing that's always going to stand out is the Deshaun Watson deal, and it's crazy, it's fascinating how that deal soured so much within this organization that had so much promise, like the 2+ decades of just nothingness since the team returned in 99 and they finally, you know, you had 1-31 in 16-17. The goal was you come out of that and you have a contending team, and obviously we know nothing's guaranteed in this league, as that's been proven right now with the Browns, but you know, they were trying to finally turn this organization around. There were signs that the culture had finally turned around. There were signs that you had good players who were going to be foundational pieces for your franchise for years to come. And in the span of 3 years, you trade for the wrong guy at quarterback. It poisons the well in Cleveland. It poisons the locker room. And you simultaneously, that blows up in your face. You make the worst trade in NFL history. And you drive a wedge between the team and the fans and the best player that the second best player in the franchise history. I mean, I would say it's Jim Brown and Myles Garrett. Those are the two, like in franchise history. And I know that people argue Joe Thomas, but however you want to put it, he's still a top 2-3 player in the franchise's history. And to realize that like this is where this ends it's pretty remarkable. Like I there needs to be studies done on how this all went down. There needs to be documentaries told of how this came to be, why this happened, why the organization invested in Deshaun Watson as much as they did. Because like it's just crazy how that move is going to have such a ripple effect on this organization on so many levels. This being one of the most monumental moments of it all. But I mean, this could set this whole the Deshaun Watson deal, which was supposed to be about contending for Super Bowls, it could end up setting the organization back a whole nother decade before they're back in this conversation. Like that's wild to think about. They tried to swing big and they missed, and they missed as bad as you can possibly miss.
Yeah, I saw a post today. I'm going to read it. I'm going to cut out some of the flavorful language, but picture a box, right? And the Browns get Deshaun Watson. Here's what the Browns give up: Myles Garrett, 3 first-round picks, 2 third-round picks, 1 fourth-round pick, $230 million in cap space, Baker Mayfield, Joe Flacco's return, Nick Chubb's prime, Joel Bitonio's prime, Denzel Ward's prime, a bunch of wins, good coaches, like, and now you're setting yourself back so far, and it's like,
it's a good sort of reference point there. But I want to make this clear too, Megs. Like, I've been one of the biggest proponents of. I don't blame them for trying to swing big and get the quarterback. I've never blamed them for trying to upgrade the quarterback position. That's never been my point. But the problem is who you picked, and they sat there and told you we vetted this guy, and we feel confident. I know from people, reliable people I've talked to, that the team initially thought, like, when they traded for him, they thought he was getting like a 4-game suspension that first year. They did not think it was going to be 11. But you wasted that whole first year because he got 11 games. They weren't aware. They clearly were caught off guard by what the suspension was going to be. You traded all the stuff that you gave up for him. Like, they didn't vet it enough to understand, like, the mental side of it, like how much everything he was caught up in was going to impact him on the field, and how much 2+ years basically away from football was going to impact how he played again on the field. Like, yeah, you can go back and show those 2020 highlights. It's not the same quarterback anymore. And so clearly they didn't vet it enough. And the fact that decision led you to this moment in time today where Myles Garrett requests a trade, again, it's crazy how the ripples have led us to this point.
It's really, and it's sad because the people who are ultimately paying for it is the fans, right? Like, Kevin Stefanski, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but like Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry probably on their way out, right? The next year is going to be, you don't know what next year is going to be, but they'll get new jobs. Kevin will get another job, and he should. I think he's a great coach, but we're getting screwed out of a good coach. The players, obviously, you get Myles requesting a trade. You don't know what this is going to do to Denzel Ward and David Njoku, and obviously you got Jerry Jeudy kind of locked up and for a little bit, but you have decent players still on the roster. But like, this is going to shake things up in a massive way. And like, even going back, Spence, talking to a friend of mine who was once a part of the Atlanta organization, and I had asked him, I was like, hey, like, how close was like Deshaun going to the Falcons? And he goes, Falcons thought it was done, right? They go to sleep that one night and they wake up in the morning and they find out that Jimmy Haslam offered $230 million.
Sometimes the best deals are the ones you never make, right?
Yeah. And imagine how that changes things, right? Maybe at the time you're like, all right, Baker requested trade. Maybe we go get somebody, right? I don't even know who it was back in that time, but like that sliding doors moment where it's like, Haslam and Barry and probably Stefanski were sitting at a table, and probably one of them was like, don't do it. And two of them were like, do it. And they did it. And like, I'd love to be in there, but like, frankly, Spence, like, I'm going to buy the book when Kevin Stefanski writes like the 2023, I'm buying it, right? I'm reading that thing.
We all will. Yeah.
And it's like, it sucks because ultimately the fans are the ones paying for it.
Well,
right?
I feel bad for this fan base. I do. Because they waited as long as they waited. They lost their team in 99, got it back, waited 2 decades for a team to give you any sense of hope of, hey, we can, we're going to be a contending team again. We're going to, we're going to compete for championships. We have a solid foundation. The culture is finally good. 2 decades they waited for that. Mm-hmm. And then the second they got it, it all goes out the window because they made the wrong trade. And listen, I understand, like, hindsight's always 2020, but there was plenty of people who told you this was not going to work out from the beginning and warned against it. And it worked out that way. And this is the problem now that they're going to run into. Like, as much as they think like it's football and it's always going to sell and it's the Browns and we can do whatever we want and people will still buy season tickets and whatever. I've told you, like, being in the stadium all year long, there was an apathy about that team. Like, people just were not in, like, it felt like it was nothing like I've ever felt or experienced in a Browns game before. Where the fan base just was not into it this year. And it all centered around one guy. And it was kind of funny, like, the moment he was not out there anymore and it was Jameis Winston starting that next week. You had the Jim Donovan, passing away and the vibes from that, and everyone kind of like riding high off of this magical win over the Ravens. And it was like, all of a sudden people felt good again. And it was like life was better without him around. And like, that's telling. And so now I truly wonder how much more this alienates the fan base when you gambled the way you did. And okay, fine. But you were left with the apathy that they felt this season. And now you throw into the mix, like, now it's costing you potentially your best player.
Mhm.
And so how do you get the fan base back? Is it build a dome? I don't think so. Is it draft a quarterback this year? Maybe, but you also got to hit on that quarterback. If you don't hit on that quarterback, what does it matter?
Yeah.
But I said it earlier on another show I do. This is rock bottom for this organ. Okay, losing your team is always going to be rock bottom. There's nothing worse that can happen than your team getting taken from you. But since '99, I know there's been a lot of bad. 1-31 was bad. Hugh Jackson was bad, but this is rock bottom because
Well,
at least 1-31, you knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel. You knew there was something you were working for. With this, it's like, what's the end goal here? I mean, obviously to get back to contention at some point, but it's like, how soon is that going to happen? You got all these massive contracts on the books. You got to reconcile the fact that Myles Garrett's not going to be here potentially anymore. You still got Deshaun Watson on the books. You got an aging roster and you have no draft cap. You don't have like the draft assets that you drafted in recent years to sort of fill out the roster below that. So it's like you're starting all over trying to rebuild this thing. Like how many you got to hit on a lot of guys to get this thing back on track. And do you trust Andrew Berry to be that guy? And this, I think, leads into the conversation about like what's next for this team.
yeah, I mean, the trusting the Andrew Berry part to hit is like that's the scary part because it's like I am a fan. Like I don't know, I give benefit of the doubt a lot of like, hey, I don't want to do another rebuild. Like we've been through the rebuild, but like you said, at least there's light at the end of the tunnel. Now there is a world, Spence, where they don't trade him, right? And yes, that's not. I mean, if you look at it financially, I'm not the best cap guy, right? But if they do trade him, they are ultimately screwing themselves for the rest for the next couple years because all of the dead money that they've put in by restructuring his contract a number of times and paying him all this cash up front is ultimately going to force you to have to like cut guys to like just fill the roster out, right? And maybe that does become a hard reset if you do trade it. And I think maybe that's ripping the Band-Aid off. Or if you don't trade him and you do keep him, he still has 2 years left on his contract. And like it's been reported, I forget who I saw, but basically was saying, hey, this isn't a money thing. Like this is him wanting to go.
Tom Pelissero, I think so.
Yeah, it was. And
I think that's important to dispel because there's a lot of people who are like, this could just be a contract play. But to me, Megs, like you already played that card when you had the comments at the end of the season. You were like, yeah, I mean, I could play somewhere else. I want to see what their plan is. That was you kind of holding their feet to the fire. Like, hey, you got to, hey, I got a contract coming up. I'll leave if I have to. Like this is like, he's putting the paper out there and saying, no, I want out. Like he made it public. That's that's not a sign that you're just trying to negotiate a new contract. That's like, I truly want out.
Because, and also too, like you have to imagine that like that wasn't the first time Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, the whole brass had something like they definitely knew weeks ago, like, hey guys, like I'm going to request this trade or you're going to figure it out. And finally it was probably like, hey, I don't see any progress. I'm putting the tweet out, guys. It's going out at noon, like, or whatever it was, and it's going to catch fire. And, it's just, it's the frustrating part. And like, yeah, you would get a Hall back for him, right? That'd be the one positive. The one there, I see there's two.
But I do think Browns
we don't have to get to him, but go ahead.
I think Browns fans think you're going to get a Hall. I don't know. Like I saw Diana Rossini put out like what the package might actually look like. And she was like a first plus. And what a plus meant like a first and a second and maybe a player, a first and 2/3 and maybe a player. But like all these people who are like 3 first-round picks, like that ain't happening. Maybe you could get it to 2 firsts, especially with the Browns kind of digging their feet in and saying, hey, we're not trading them. That's how you get teams to be like, all right, we'll give you a Godfather offer. But I don't know that you're just going to get like but either way, like that helps. That helps the cause.
But I would also say too, like you're going to trade him to a contender. You're not trading him to, I don't even know any of the bad teams. You're not trading him to the Saints, right? He's not going. You're going to trade him to a team that can go. So that first round pick, it's not going to be a top 5 pick. This is going to be a back half of the first round pick, which is fine, which is still really, really good. But it's like, all right, there's a lot of hard conversations happening right now because, like you said, the direction of the franchise is definitely in the balance right now, and there's no good answer.
Well, to me, I think the direction of the franchise was in the balance before this. I think this provides some clarity, honestly. Yep. Like I think, and I was very adamant, like you don't need to blow it up in this league to like stay competitive. Like I was kind of banging the drum of like, you got Myles Garrett here, you got Denzel Ward here, you got some cornerstone players. Like, yeah, it's tough, but you do have to try to thread the needle and stay competitive to the best of your ability here. So take a shot, like try. Maybe you draft that quarterback. I don't know. Even though I don't love this quarterback class, and that's a different conversation. But regardless, like this to me, changes that. Like if Myles Garrett isn't going to be part of this, if Myles Garrett isn't going to be here anymore, that gives you the clarity you need to not have to like play this game of like, well, are we good or aren't we good? Are we what we were in 2023 or are we what we were in 2024? Now you can just say, okay, it blow it up. It's time to rebuild. Like that's to me what the answer is. If this is truly Myles Garrett being like, I went out and I think it is, then like to me, this gives you the clarity you need to not keep pretending that you're something that you're not, and to just go get the draft capital. Heck, if you need to trade Denzel Ward to get more draft capital, trade Denzel Ward to get more draft capital. Like whatever you got to do to accumulate picks and get this roster back on track. That's, I think, what you have to do from here now. So my philosophy changes. I was very much like, yeah, keep it together, try to make it work. Maybe you don't draft a quarterback this year, but maybe you get one early next year, and that's your franchise guy, and he has like a Jaden Daniels situation going on. And you can maybe, compile enough picks to trade up if you're not a top 5 picking team again. But now I'm like, no, forget it. Like if he's out, embrace the fact that you need to rebuild this thing and just get as many draft assets as possible. That's the only way forward at this point.
Yeah, can't hardly argue with that at all, because like you said, it at least gives you direction. And the really hard part is that I was on a walk tonight and just like lost in thoughts. And I was listening to a show and it was at the Super Bowl. And like you said, this is supposed to be like the fun week where everyone who's not playing is like, how are we going to get back here? And I'm like, the Browns are just never going to be, they're just never, ever going to be in Super Bowl week.
This is the most prominent the Browns will be during Super Bowl week.
Right, exactly. Yes, it's Myles Garrett, the best player ever.
At least it feels that way. Yeah.
But then you think back to just 365 ago, right? And I say this in two ways, right? You think back to 365 days ago, the Browns coming off a playoff run, like you felt like we were kind of had the ability to ascend. And now you're like, there's no way that anybody would have fast forward one whole year and was like 3-14, Myles Garrett gone, all of the bad things that happened.
Isn't it wild, man? Isn't it wild how like a year ago everything was great and now 1 year later everything's gone to shit? Like it's from
just
only the Browns. Only the Browns, man. Truly.
And there's no way that this happens because the Commanders caught lightning in a bottle, but they were in the opposite position just 365 days ago. I won't go positive tonight, but I'm just saying, hold on to it. Hold on to hope if you're with
Meg's is hoping they draft the right quarterback and they just
think we could trade Myles for Jaden Daniels straight up?
Probably not. I'm gonna guess they would say no to that trade. Although I did see somewhere that the Commanders had some of the best odds to land Myles Garrett, so that's kind of interesting. But no, and that I think maybe a good place to put a bow in this conversation is like if the path forward is blow it up, start all over. That doesn't just stop with the roster. Like to me, this also sort of signals that Andrew Berry at least, and maybe Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are kind of like dead men walking. Like if they lose Myles Garrett, if they trade Myles Garrett again, Andrew Berry's resume will forever say worst trade in NFL history, and you traded and alienated the second greatest player in Browns franchise history, and ended up having to trade him. Like that's not a very good resume to go boasting around to like earn another job somewhere. So, and whether or not it's more like Haslam was the guy driving the bus on the Deshaun trade or not, it's on Andrew Berry's resume forever. Like he can't shake that. He's gonna wear that forever. And so, yeah, like I don't. If the path forward is rebuild, if the path forward is accumulate picks and draft players, what have we learned from Andrew Berry over the last couple of years to think that he's going to nail these picks? That's the biggest problem I have is like I don't know that we like if that might be what you need to do, but are the right people in power to use those picks to actually restore the franchise back to prominence? That's the big question, and that remains to be seen. I mean, the only time this guy's made first round picks, it was Jedrick Wills, who hasn't worked out. And Greg Newsome, who's been a solid corner, but he's not like necessarily like a first round talent corner by any stretch. So I don't know, man. Like I think if you're blowing it up, it's a little late in the game, but you can always find a new GM somewhere. I mean, I know the Bills, the year they hired Sean McDermott, they hired their GM. They hired Brandon Beane like after the draft. So there's always possibilities that you could steal somebody later. But yeah, like I know I'm not saying Kevin Stefanski in this. It sort of just seems useless to have both of them still here. If the end result's going to be they get fired in a year anyway, why are you going to let them pick any players in this if you end up trading Myles Garrett? But I guess I trust Kevin Stefanski more. I still feel like he's a part of the solution, not the problem, more so than I can trust Andrew Berry. And so because of that, I'm like, if one has to go, it's got to be Berry, and let Kevin maybe drive the ship on like who you're picking or whatever. I don't know. I know he's not a GM by trade, but like, and maybe it's too late in the game to do it because the draft is not too far away. But this is why I said like this sets the organization back on a number of different levels, including like what the front office looks like. But a rebuild is a rebuild. It's not just trade a bunch of good players away. It's like no, you got to reset a lot of different things.
And the scarier part of that is like, all right, let's say that the writing is on the wall and Andrew Berry is out, but like you said, it's too late in the game to fire him. Then your owner's making the pick, and that's just not. Then you get into Jerry Jones.
Then you start talking to hobos on the street, and they tell you to draft bad quarterbacks, and you just
Then it gets weird, man, and that's just it sucks that this is where we're at because the Browns fans need and deserve much better than this, and it just is frustrating that the more things change, man, the more they stay the same. And the worst part is like if they do trade Myles Garrett, like. We just signed ourselves up for a lame duck year, right? Where it's going to be more the same. You know what I mean? It's like, all right.
Well, but that's the point. Like that's why it feels so hard for me to be like, yeah, bring this entire front office, the entire brass of the organization, bring them all back in what, like you said, could just end up being a lame duck year. Like that's the last thing you want to do.
And that goes for the players. That goes for everybody, man. It's just this is. I tell you what, I didn't wake up today thinking, "Ooh, Myles Garrett's going to request a trade."
Who did? Nobody. I mean, maybe the Browns knew, but I mean, nobody thought that. And like you said, I just feel bad for the fan base. This city, this fan base has been loyal. I mean, this team is ingrained in they are woven into this community in a very unique and special way. And so much about this city is about the Browns and the passion that this fan base has for that team. And it's part of their identity, frankly. Yeah. And, for the organization to, in a way, take that for granted. They didn't take it for, I shouldn't say they took it for granted because they were trying to make the team a winning team. I get that. But to ruin that and spoil that with the moves that you made and alienate them and drive them away, especially as you're getting ready to build a new stadium and convince people to show up to it when season tickets are going to be crazy expensive and there's going to be PSLs and all this stuff. It's just not great. It is organizational malpractice, and this is a stain on the organization. An organization that's had plenty of stains prior to now. Yeah,
it feels like more of the same. We've been here, we've done that, but for whatever reason, this one feels so much worse.
How about this comment from Bradley Weirich? I want the Chiefs to trade for Myles Garrett just so the world can burn. That's the last thing anybody wants. What would be funny though is if the Bills traded for Myles Garrett. And then they'll still just end up losing to the Chiefs.
Spence, and I asked the question. I was going to hold it. I was not going to do this.
What?
I was not going to do this. But what's worse, this stuff that we've had to endure or 4 straight trips to the playoffs and getting your heart ripped out?
The Super Bowl, you mean? Oh, you're saying that? Oh,
you're saying
the
Bills, man.
No, this is worse. I mean, come on. At least the Bills, you're like, we're the Bills can look at those games and say like we're a player or two away from actually advancing.
They've been a player or two away for half a decade.
Yeah, but you come on, man. You'd rather be watching football that was meaningful to you until the end of January rather than sitting here waiting for Myles Garrett's trade requests during Super Bowl week.
I like mock drafts better, brother.
Well, that you wouldn't be a Browns fan if you didn't. Anyway, guys, we appreciate you stopping by. For this conversation. Obviously, a lot to unpack. There'll be plenty more to unpack throughout the week. And we got plenty of content up at the Cleveland Browns and SI or the actual URL, si.com/NFL/Browns. Opinion pieces, the actual news on the story, that Diana Rossini trade package that could potentially be out there if the Browns do follow through on trading him, and much, much more. So be sure to head over there and check it all out. And be sure to find more content like this at the Cleveland Browns on SI YouTube page as well. Thanks for watching. I apologize for the Browns for ruining your Monday, ruining your Super Bowl week. I feel for you Browns fans, but we hope you'll stick with us. We hope you'll keep on following along with all things Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Browns on SI.